General matters. 8.1 is the RCMP Q3 quarterly update and decriminalization. Staff Sergeant Dyson.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, and staff. I, for one, was completely surprised to hear that all these people aren't here to listen to me. I'm here to give you an update on for our third quarter report for the RCMP detachment here in Powell River. So we'll just go through our calls for service for the third quarter and for the year to date. We have a slight decrease, 1.5% of the third quarter over the same period last year. So we're down to 1,161 for that period. Year to date for the fiscal year, again, we're down slightly over that period as well. Our check well-being files for the third quarter were up 19% over the third quarter last year, and overall year to date, again, we're up almost 10% for those types of files. Our mental health act calls, there's a slight decrease in the third quarter. However, year over, there's a 41% increase in mental health act calls for service in the city. Unspecified assistance files. These are files that don't really neatly fall into any other particular type of call. For the third quarter, there's a decrease over last year, and for the year over, there's a 42% decrease, which is good to see. Missing persons files. There were only 7 in the third quarter, whereas there was 14 in the third quarter last year. And again, overall, there's an over 50% decrease in these types of fault calls as well. And the decreases are going to be a sort of an ongoing theme through all of our files, or most of our files. As I say that, there's 50% increase in our third quarter impaired driving files. This is a lot to do with several of our members have really started to pick up their patrols and traffic enforcement activities. So we're seeing a huge increase there. As a matter of fact, one of our members, I just got the documentation that they're receiving the Alexa Award for last year for intercepting a large number of impaired drivers over the year. Persons crimes are down. These are assaults and those types of things. For the third quarter, there's a 6% decrease, and for the year over, there's a 16% decrease. Assaults, so these fall under those as well. Again, there's a 16% decrease in the third quarter over last year and 19% year over. Sexual offenses, thankfully, are down significantly for the third quarter compared to last year. And for the year over, again, they're down over 40%, which is great to see. Our harassment files are down as well. Not a huge decrease, but 16% for the quarter and almost 10% for the year over. Uttering threats files, there was a increase, 45% increase for the quarter, but for the year, there is a slight decrease in those calls overall. Our property crime numbers are staying pretty static. There's a 3% decrease, which is negligible. However, almost a 10% decrease in reported property crimes over the year. Our bike thefts, we show only an increase for the quarter from only 2. Again, these are reported bike thefts. One of the issues that we're really trying to push is to have people report these so we can try to track them better. And I'll talk about our Project 529 project at the end, but that is engaged and starting to show some fruit so far. And again, for the year, there is a 31% increase in bike thefts. Break and enters. So if we're just looking at third quarter, our residential B&Es, all B&Es are up. There's a 22% increase overall. The other B&Es, so that don't fall neatly into one of those categories, those are down by 1. For the year, there is an overall decrease of 11% for break and enters, residential, business, and others. Theft unders, there is an increase for the third quarter, and there is a fairly large increase in for the year over of 25%. Shoplifting files, our reported shoplifting files are down 19% for the quarter compared to last year, and a 44% decrease in over the year. One of the things anecdotally that we've heard is that there are certain corporations that have company policies where they are not reporting these, which makes it a challenge for us to try to address them or to get property back. Oftentimes we will get third-party complaints where somebody watches somebody shoplift, and the company, because of their policy, won't cooperate with those, provide evidence, or follow through on those particulars. So there's really no victim in those particular cases. So that's been a bit of a challenge for us. Theft from vehicles, there's a 70% increase from 10 to 17 over the quarter. Over the year, there's a 72% increase. I referenced this in the very end. There's a bit of a challenge. We believe that we know a single person who is almost single-handedly the reason for most of this. We are working to try to get that person off the streets and not doing this. It's been a bit of a challenge for us, and I'll explain a bit of that at the end. Theft of vehicle, we're up from 4 to 6 for the quarter. However, for the year, we're down 16% from 18 to 15. Frauds are basically staying static from the third quarter last year and year over exactly the same. Our mischiefs, we have a 24% decrease for the quarter, which is great, and for the year down by 28%. So we're seeing a decrease in that type of activity, reported that type of activity. Our drug offenses for the third quarter of this year is down by about 53%. But however, for the year over, they are up. There's a 20% increase in our drug offenses for the year. Our drug trafficking files, which fall into there as well, were down slightly over the quarter. However, we're up year over from 12 to 16 for a 33% increase. Our weapons offenses are down for the quarter and down for the year by 12%. Just looking at our total file count for the detachment. So this covers all files for all of our areas, including what we call the unorganized or the provincial areas. So we're staying pretty much static. There is a bit of a decrease to 4,954 for 2025 compared to the year before. So we are trending downwards a little teeny bit, but it's not a huge or significant change. So one of the things that's been in the news lately and that I was asked to sort of address here is the drug decriminalization, which ended January 31st. So with the end of the drug decriminalization pilot project, all controlled substances are once again prohibited to possess within the province of British Columbia. There are a few exceptions to that. There are some exemptions in certain locations, but overall, they are now prohibited again. So our members will be applying a holistic approach in enforcing the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act. However, they'll be guided by the principles that are noted in Section 10 of the Act, which are outlined here. This is not verbatim for the most part from the Act, but just to give you an idea. So problematic substances, that use should be addressed primarily as a health and social issue rather than a strictly enforcement-based issue. Intervention should be founded on evidence-based best practices and should aim to protect the health, dignity, and human rights of individuals. Criminal sanctions imposed in respect of the possession of drugs for personal use can increase the stigma associated with drug use and are not consistent with established public health evidence. So if we're going to go that way, we have to understand why we're doing it and what the purpose is. And try to do it in a manner that doesn't stigmatize those that use these substances. Intervention should address the root cause of the problematic substance use, including and encouraging measures such as education, treatment, aftercare, rehabilitation, and social reintegration. So getting people who use these substances into care and into the right resources is a huge part of what we aim to do. And judicial resources are more appropriately used in relation to offenses that pose a risk to public safety. In some instances, there was an issue recently where a young child found somebody's lost or discarded drugs and ended up with them in their mouth. Obviously, that's a huge public safety issue. So those types of issues we want to see if we can address and get people the help that they need so that we don't see instances like that have a much more serious end result. So as I've mentioned before, and as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, Project 529 garage is deployed in Powell River. We've seen an increase in the number of bicycles that are now registered on the system, which is great. We encourage everyone with a bike to download the app and get the bike registered. So in the event that it's taken, that we are able to try to locate it and have more eyes looking for that bike and try to get it back and try to address the people that are stealing these bikes, not just have them continue. We had a registration table at the Kings game on January 31st, which is well attended. I haven't looked to see since then how many responses we got, if any, from then, if there was an uptick. But we also have a registration table scheduled for a cycling film festival in April that we're hoping to actually have bikes there onto the system and identified so that we're hoping to reduce the number of thefts and get them come back when they are. As I talked earlier, one of the issues that we're having with identifying some people is working closely with various partners to address several issues, one of which being the theft from vehicles. And we're trying to sort of increase our collaboration with some of our partners to address the clients that we share together and not run into roadblocks or have issues where we're focusing on different things. Our Block Watch program has seen a huge growth just in the last couple of months. We've included 5 new blocks into the program. Those are in the Westview area. And so that with the existing block that existed in Wildwood, we now have six blocks with more that are in the works. So we welcome those areas into the program, and hopefully we'll see a reduction in problems in those areas and an increased reporting for problems in those areas. And that is my presentation.
Thank you very much. We're going to start for questions on the far right side and work around.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Staff Sergeant. I was curious, the drug trafficking notes that you had over there, there was, I think, 16 cases for the year so far. And I imagine in a situation like that, it's not necessarily an investigation is maybe not so cut and dry as maybe some other offenses in terms of catching someone in the act and things like that. So when you're reporting data, I guess I was curious how many of these situations are just the cases on file, or is an indication of a case kind of being closed? Like how does this RCMP determine at that point, especially for a situation like trafficking in that case?
So that number would be those files that are reported during that period. There will be ongoing files that could have begun in a previous quarter or a previous year, for example, that will continue and come to fruition. Those would have been reported on when they were actually reported to us and the file created.
Thank you.
No questions. I just wanted to express appreciation for the year to date. I think it gives a really good comparison. Thank you.
So Silthcott.
Thank you. I actually have 3 questions. You spoke to reporting and how some businesses particularly are not reporting shoplifting. I spoke with someone today who told me something pretty distressing, but and it was about a robbery essentially that happened a short time ago that was not on the street. Cash was involved, and I urged her to get her friend, who she was telling me about, to call, at least just tell you. I'm just asking this question because I'm expecting the answer is that you would urge anyone who was involved in any kind of an incident like that to report it, because I suggested to her that the results very possibly are longer term or could be involved with other incidents, which she hadn't considered. But I just was I right in urging her to report anything like this?
Absolutely. It is extremely important that we get these notifications. Sometimes what people will find is we're not able to deal directly with that particular instance. We may not have enough information. However, what often happens is the methods used, some of the words used, the clothing worn will link several different offenses together and allow us to identify a string of offenses that happened by one person. And that has happened here recently where the person wore the same clothes for every offense, and we were able to link several together and get that person. So, you know, we have a process to try to help people, especially when they go through these traumatizing things. Our victim services are very, very good at trying to help them through the process. And not trying to re-victimize them as the process goes. But it's important that we get these people stopped that are causing these, especially the violent acts against our community.
Councillor Silscott, if you don't mind, we'll go around and come back.
Right on. Thank you.
Councillor Doubt, do you have a?
Yeah, but I'll ask them one at a time if you like. So when I looked at the results, the report earlier, I went through and read them all. I didn't notice a huge uptake in trafficking or other drug crimes from previous years. And I know that decriminalization has actually completely happened, been taken off the table right at the end of January. But before that, earlier in the year, the rules on possession were changed. And I don't see that that has resulted in a huge increase in people being apprehended for possession or for public drug use. Am I correct in that? And I think it's explained in your presentation there why that might not have happened.
Absolutely. And those rules existed prior to January 31st, and they've been something that we've used to guide our activities long before that.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wanted to let you know that I'm here to listen to you.
Thank you.
With respect to decriminalization and your focus on public safety for the way you're going to use these changes, public safety has been a big, huge concern of everybody, of a lot of people in our community. And so can you give us some examples on things you might be changing on the ground to help address the public safety issues that people are worried about?
Not quite sure I understand the question in that.
So we had the decriminalization, and now we have the recriminalization. So we have added tools to help us keep the community safe. And so would your policing look different as a result of that? And if so, how?
What it does for us is it opens up another avenue to be able to address some of these issues. Whereas before, the criminal avenue wasn't open during the pilot project, that is now open. All the other things that were open and available before are still there. All this does for us is it opens up that in certain cases where it would be appropriate, we have that opportunity to be able to look at that avenue as maybe something that's appropriate along with these other projects and services that are available.
Okay, I have another question, but I'll wait.
Councillor Palm.
Your Worship, Sergeant, it's always good to see you in the chamber, and I have meant no disrespect by moving items up. Look forward to your report. It gives us a good window on the world and our little community of Powell River. So one quick question, and that is in terms of the car thefts, are we seeing that primarily as a result of citizens leaving their car unlocked, or is it ramping up where there's actually break-ins to those vehicles? So I think that's an important point.
I don't know specifically. I haven't looked at in those cases how many are actually with the vehicles left. I know that many of our thefts from vehicle historically have been crimes of opportunity where a door is left unlocked. I can tell you that one of the thefts for sure was a properly secured vehicle that was stolen out of a driveway and then we later found. There were some other things that sort of went into that particular thing, but for the rest of them, I really can't answer specifically.
For that, appreciate it. Thank you, Worship.
As a pre-COVID block watch leader, I'm curious as to whether or not you have an informative program for people that are thinking about becoming a block watch leader.
Yes, if anybody's looking for some information, if you contact our office, our community policing member is able to provide as much information as possible to be able to give people an idea of what the program is, how it works, how people get involved, and how to get their block started.
Thank you. So, Amita, do you have a follow-up?
No question, but as a follow-up to the block watch, maybe RCMP staff can share some of that block watch information with our media team for a post on the city's social media to help spread the word.
We've already met with them and that process is underway.
Councillor Southcott.
Yeah, thank you. So relative to that situation where the child ended up with a little package of drugs, when my son was quite young, just before we moved back here, at a birthday party, I brought a couple, because I was working in the industry, so I brought a couple of needles, the kind that are used by users, home, and the birthday party was outside dominantly, so I just stuck them down beside the curb, and at one point I had a little 1 or 2 minute education session with the whole group of kids at this birthday party, and they learned, I made it a riddle. Do you see anything dangerous around here? And they're all looking around. And, one of them saw the needles pretty quickly. And I said, okay, what are they and what do you do with them? And it was as simple as that. Of course, the answer is you don't touch them and you call an adult, which I think that people in North Vancouver, where I was living at the time, were a little more in tune than our community. And I don't say that critically because I think the shocking street situations in our community are a lot newer than they are in Vancouver. But the question is there any thought, like your community policing officer, is there any programs that might help our community to learn about this kind of stuff, or alerts, or has there been some thought about, I hate to use the word education because nobody likes that word, I think, but just kind of get us in position so things like we're more alert. That's what I'm wondering about. Has that been thought about? I know that your community policing officer did a session with the merchants in the mall, which I attended, and I was very impressed. I thought that was an excellent initiative. So I'm just wondering if something more can be done for our whole community. Is that a possibility? Could it happen perhaps with another agency?
We can definitely look into that. I'm not personally familiar if there's a pre-existing situation like that. The DARE program was kind of along those lines, although that's no longer in existence. I can look into that and I can report back. I'm not familiar if there's a pre-existing one. However, if there isn't, we can definitely design something where we can have an open house and discuss some of these issues. My understanding, and I'm not completely familiar with that file down to the, all the nuances, but I think part of the issue here was a very young child, and it was a colorful package. And, as we all know, young children, everything goes in the mouth, and it was colorful to draw attention. And it just, it would have taken just a slight moment of a parent not paying attention for this to happen. So luckily they found it, but I will look into if there's a pre-existing situation that we can deal with. I would be surprised if there wasn't in the current climate, and we can see what we can find.
Councillor Doug.
No, I'm going to sneak in a two-part question here. First off, it looks to me like the numbers are generally down. There's a couple of anomalies in the figures there where there's an increase in the last year.
Absolutely.
But mostly they're down. And my question is, would you describe Powell River as being in the midst of a crime wave? And maybe you could compare the crime that we're seeing in Powell River with other neighboring communities. Is it higher or lower?
I don't know the numbers in other places. I just got back from a conference with our other commanders, and in discussions with those, I think we're in a much better place than most places. That's anecdotal. I wouldn't say we're in the middle of a crime wave. I think we have our blips like we're seeing with our thefts from vehicle right now, but overall, I think our crime statistics are relatively low compared to other places.
Thank you.
You have another question?
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. So with respect to decriminalization, which is our newest thing happening, can you confirm that the exemptions that OPS sites had even prior to decriminalization are still in existence? And if people are fearing traveling to and from OPS sites, is there anything you can speak to about that?
So yes, I can't speak specifically to ours as to when theirs expires, but yes, those exemptions still exist. That was the sort of exceptions that I told you about for that in my discussion where we talked about with a few exceptions. Those are the ones I'm referring to. So certain places still have those exemptions. As far as traveling to and from, if somebody were to draw attention of the police and ended up in a situation where they were being dealt with and drugs were located, then those 5 points would be taken into consideration in part of the discussion with them to decide what the correct, what an appropriate level of response would be, including possibly criminally, or, you know, whatever the appropriate thing is, get them some resources, whatever the situation happens to be. And it would be, you know, each situation would be considered on its own merits.
Thank you so much.
Any additional?
Your Worship, just a quick question to clarify for the public. I think it's very important in terms of what happened to the infant that was involved with the drugs. And that package that was shown in that, is that an illegal substance that's trafficked, not handed out, for example, at an OPS?
I don't know. I don't know if we've tested yet what was in that product. I believe we have, but I'm not 100% positive. If it's what we think it is, that is not something that would be handed out at an OPS site. That would not be a controlled.
Thanks for that. Yep.
Or a safe supply.
Any additional questions before we move on? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.